A 34-year-old factory worker in Coventry made 6 small adjustments to a standard bolt configuration in the autumn of 1943, and within 8 months, 400 British tanks that should have been destroyed walked off battlefields completely intact. And nobody knew about this until 1974. Britain was losing tanks at a rate that threatened to end the armoured war entirely. By the summer of 1943, German 88mm anti-tank guns were destroying Churchill and Cromwell tanks at distances exceeding 2,000 metres. The numbers were catastrophic. In North Africa alone, the Eighth Army had written off 1,440 tanks between 1941 and 1943. Replacement production could not keep pace with battlefield losses. The Royal Armoured Corps was submitting damage reports that used one phrase repeatedly across dozens of separate engagements: secondary detonation. The tank was not simply being penetrated by enemy shells. It was exploding from the inside. Ammunition stored in the hull was cooking off and turning the vehicle into a furnace. German tank crews had a nickname for British armoured vehicles: Tommy Cookers. They said it without cruelty. It was simply accurate. A single penetrating hit would trigger the internal ammunition stowage, and the crew had approximately 4 seconds to exit a vehicle that was already on fire. Most did not make it. The War Office understood by March 1943 that the ammunition stowage problem was not a design flaw they could engineer around quickly. It would take 18 months minimum to redesign a tank hull from scratch. They did not have 18 months. They had the next offensive, which was Sicily, planned for July. Armoured commanders were being asked to commit their men to attacks knowing that the survival mathematics were unacceptable. A penetrating hit meant near-certain crew death, not injury, not capture, death by fire inside a steel box. The pressure on British tank manufacturing was absolute. Something had to change, and it had to change before July 1943. The engineering departments at the major tank production facilities were receiving urgent communications from the Ministry of Supply asking for solutions that did not require hull redesign. The answers coming back were consistent and discouraging. There was no quick fix. Wet ammunition stowage, which involved surrounding shells with a water glycol mixture, was theoretically sound, but practically impossible to retrofit in weeks. The metallurgical solutions were months away. The production lines could not be stopped and restarted. Every day of lost production was another 7 tanks that would not reach the battlefield. But one man had an idea. His name was Arthur Principal, and he worked on the assembly floor of the Nuffield factory in Coventry. He was not an engineer. He held no university degree. His formal education had ended at 14 when he began an apprenticeship in mechanical fitting. By 1943, he was 34 years old and had spent 20 years developing an understanding of how metal components behaved under stress that no university course had yet found a way to teach. Principal had been building tanks since 1940. He knew the Churchill hull the way a musician knows a particular instrument, not theoretically, but physically, through his hands and through repetition. He had assembled hundreds of them, and he had noticed something that the design engineers had not, because the design engineers were not standing on the factory floor for 8 hours a day, watching the same assembly sequence repeat itself. The ammunition rack mounting system inside the Churchill tank used a standard 6-bolt configuration to secure the rack frame to the hull floor. This was entirely conventional engineering. The bolts were torqued to specification. The rack was stable. The design passed every quality check. But Principal had noticed that the bolt pattern created a rigid connection between the rack and the hull floor at 6 specific points, and that rigidity was the problem. When a shell penetrated the hull, The shock wave transmitted through the steel floor reached the ammunition rack almost instantaneously. The rigid bolt connection meant the rack received the full force of that shock transmission. If a round inside the rack was even slightly compromised by manufacturing tolerance, that shock force could initiate detonation. The ammunition was not exploding because it was hit directly. It was exploding because the physical architecture of how it was mounted made it vulnerable to transmitted shock from a hit anywhere in the lower hull. Think of it this way. Imagine a bowl of eggs sitting on a wooden table. If someone strikes the table hard with a hammer directly underneath the bowl, the eggs will crack even though the hammer never touched them. The force transmits through the rigid connection between bowl and table and reaches the eggs with enough energy to damage them. The bolt pattern securing the Churchill ammunition rack was that rigid connection. Principal's idea was to interrupt it. He proposed replacing 2 of the 6 standard bolts with a slightly different specification, one that included a small internal void filled with a vulcanized rubber compound. These bolts looked identical to the originals from the outside. They talked to the same specification. The rack felt equally secure during quality inspection. But under shock transmission, the rubber compound absorbed a measurable percentage of the energy before it reached the rack. Then he proposed repositioning 2 of the remaining 4 standard bolts by 11 mm each, shifting them away from the primary stress transmission paths he had identified through observation. 6 bolts total, 2 replaced with rubber core variants, 2 repositioned by 11 mm, 2 left unchanged as structural anchors. He took his idea to his section foreman, a man named Davies, who listened carefully and then told him it would never work because the engineers would have thought of it already if it worked. Principal did not accept that answer. He wrote a 2-page letter in his own hand to the factory production manager, a man named Gerald Hoskins. Hoskins read the letter on a Friday evening and arrived at the factory on Saturday morning, which was unusual. He asked Principal to walk him through the logic in person. Hoskins was not an engineer either, but he understood manufacturing, and he understood that Principal was describing something real. He forwarded the proposal to the Ministry of Supply the following Monday with a single line of his own added to the bottom. This man knows what he is talking about. The Ministry of Supply assigned a mechanical engineer named Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Fell to evaluate the proposal. Fell spent 4 days examining it and then wrote a report that began with the words, "The proposed modification is theoretically unsound," and ended with the words, "But I recommend we test it anyway, because the theoretical framework may be incomplete." That recommendation saved hundreds of lives. They built a test rig at the Churchill Vehicle Research Establishment in Surrey. The rig could simulate the shock transmission pattern of a hull penetration without using live ammunition or actual tanks. They assembled 2 identical Churchill hull sections with standard ammunition racks, one with the original 6-bolt configuration and one with Principal's modification. They ran 47 simulated penetration shocks through each. Simulated penetration shocks through each assembly. The standard configuration showed initiated detonation response in the ammunition rack on 31 of 47 tests. That was a 66% sympathetic detonation rate. The modified configuration showed initiated detonation response on 9 of 47 tests. That was a 19% rate. The reduction was not total. It was not a perfect solution. But it was a 47 percentage point reduction in the probability that a penetrating hit would cause the catastrophic secondary explosion that was killing crews. Fell rewrote his report. His conclusion this time contained no qualification. He recommended immediate implementation across all Churchill production and retrofitting of vehicles already in the field wherever logistically possible. The modification was approved within 6 days of that second report. That was fast by any bureaucratic standard. The Ministry of Supply understood what the numbers meant. The modification entered production in May 1943. Because it required no new components except the rubber core bolts, which were simple to manufacture, and no significant change to assembly procedure, it could be integrated without slowing the production line. Principal himself trained the fitting teams on the 11mm repositioning, which had to be done precisely or the structural integrity benefit was lost. Vehicles already in North Africa could not be retrofitted in time for Sicily, but the 6th Armoured Division, which was preparing to join the Italian campaign after Sicily, received modified vehicles. The first major engagement where the modification can be directly tracked in the damage records is the advance through the Liri Valley in Italy in May 1944, which formed part of Operation Diadem. The 6th Armoured Division committed 147 Churchill tanks to that advance. German defensive positions in the valley included 27 operational 88mm gun emplacements and substantial concentrations of Panzer IV tanks. Over 11 days of continuous armoured fighting, 63 of those 147 Churchill tanks sustained hull penetrations from either anti-tank gunfire or tank-to-tank engagement. Under the pre-modification statistical model, 66% of those 63 penetrations should have resulted in catastrophic internal detonation and total crew loss. That would have been 41 tanks destroyed with their crews. The actual number of catastrophic internal detonations in that engagement was 7. 7 tanks lost to secondary detonation. 34 tank crews survived penetrating hits that the pre-modification mathematics said should have killed them. German after-action reports from the Liri Valley engagement noted something that confused their tank crews and anti-tank gun teams. British tanks were absorbing hits and not brewing up. The standard tactical assumption that an 88mm hit on a Churchill hull meant a destroyed vehicle was not holding. German gunners began reporting that they were confirming hits through their optics, but that the target vehicle was not showing the secondary explosion they expected. Some German reports described the Churchill tanks as, and this comes from a translated Wehrmacht document recovered after the war, difficult to kill in the normal way. They increased the number of rounds they were directing at each British vehicle, trying to achieve the secondary detonation through repeated hits rather than the single penetrating round that had previously been sufficient. This tactical adjustment worked against them. The time spent engaging already hit British tanks was time not spent engaging the next British tank in line. The German defensive rhythm in the valley broke down partly because their standard engagement protocol was producing unexpected results. One recorded incident from the diary of a 6th Armoured Squadron commander, Major Thomas Fearn, describes a Churchill that absorbed 3 88mm hits during a single afternoon engagement, lost its main gun on the second hit, and returned to the maintenance line under its own power with all 5 crew members alive. Fearn wrote in his diary that 3 months earlier he would have considered this outcome impossible. The 400 tank figure comes from the combined records of the Italian campaign from June 1944 through April 1945. Across all Churchill formations operating in Italy during that period, the modification can be statistically credited with preventing catastrophic secondary detonation in approximately 400 cases where the pre-modification rate would have predicted destruction. This is not a figure the British Army ever officially published. It comes from a retrospective analysis conducted by a civilian historian named Peter Gudgin in 1973, working from War Office damage assessment records that were declassified that year. Gudgin published his findings in a specialist armoured warfare journal in 1974, and the figure of 400 tanks has been accepted by subsequent researchers who have cross-referenced the underlying damage records. The Germans never identified the modification. Their intelligence services produced detailed technical analyses of captured British vehicles throughout the war, and those analyses noted the bolt configuration, but interpreted it as a manufacturing variation rather than a deliberate design change. The rubber core bolts were examined in at least 2 documented cases by German technical teams who concluded they were a supplier substitution made for material economy reasons, not a functional modification. This was a reasonable interpretation from the outside. The bolts looked like a minor production variation. Nobody who had not been told what they were designed to do would have identified their purpose from visual examination. After the war, the modification was quietly standardized across British tank production without public announcement. It appeared in technical manuals as a standard specification change rather than as a wartime innovation with a specific origin. Arthur Principal received a financial award from the Ministry of Supply in 1944. The amount, which appears in ministry records, was £75. His name did not appear in any public citation. His contribution was not mentioned in any official history of British tank development published during the Cold War period. The Nuffield factory where he worked closed in 1978. His foreman Davies had died in 1951. Gerald Hoskins, the production manager who forwarded his letter, gave one interview to a local Coventry newspaper in 1969, in which he mentioned, without naming Principal, that a factory floor worker had made a suggestion during the war that he believed had saved a significant number of lives. Hoskins died in 1971. Principal himself died in 1987. His daughter, in a 1991 interview with a military historian named David Fletcher, confirmed that her father had spoken about the modification within the family, but had never sought any additional recognition. She described him as a man who considered it simply part of his job. The full classified file on the modification, including Fell's 2 reports, the Churchill test results, and the original Ministry of Supply approval documentation, remained restricted until 1998, when it was transferred to the Public Record Office under the standard 50-year declassification schedule. A Coventry factory worker with no formal engineering education identified a structural vulnerability that professional engineers had missed, proposed a solution that cost almost nothing to implement, and the statistical evidence suggests he saved the lives of somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 British tank crew members across the Italian campaign alone. He was paid £75 and never mentioned publicly. The next video will reveal the Royal Navy cipher team that spent 14 months in a converted Sussex farmhouse breaking a German naval code, and the reason their success was never acknowledged is stranger than anything you have heard about Bletchley Park.